This is a split call with my colleague Stefan Browning. Thank you. This year is the 120th anniversary of women gaining suffrage in this country. It's also the 80th anniversary of women entering Parliament and the 20th anniversary of women first taking leadership of a political party in this country. I think it's particularly important in this year, and especially this week, following the death of Dame Margaret Shields, to consider how our political system is doing for women and how this government, and in particular that through this budget, is delivering for women. Of course, we've made really significant progress since the 70s, but there are a sample of measures that tell me we've still got a long way to go. And in this speech, I would like to look at just one of those measures, which is around the gender pay gap. We have an entrenched gender pay gap, and according to some measures, it's growing. Other measures tell us that it may be narrowing because male wages are declining. So what is this budget offering us as women to make some fundamental change in the inequality that exists for us in this country? According to the Minister of Finance, one of this government's priorities with this budget is to build a more productive and competitive economy. Well, that should really bode well for women, you'd think, especially in light of the Goldman Sachs research last year that showed that closing the gender pay gap could increase productivity by 10%. That's worth over $20 billion a year to this economy. And surely that kind of outcome would be worth actively and strongly pursuing a policy towards that end. Yet the budget announcements relating to promoting a productive and competitive economy have been devoid of gender analysis. The Minister is focused on increasing tourism with $20 million a year, marketing education overseas with $10 million a year, and $25 million a year on new R&D. Now, it's not that I don't believe in any of those initiatives, but I really struggle to see how they've got the potential that's held within measures that would reduce the gender pay gap. So what's the government doing to close the gap? Well, my temptation, honestly, is to say nothing. They've said they're not going to put anything into extending paid parental leave, and they've threatened the financial veto against the will of this House, despite the fact that extending paid parental leave will strengthen women's attachment to the workforce, and the loss of that contributes to the gender pay gap. Further, they've legislated against paying family carers their legal entitlements, which would have significantly helped with the gender pay gap. Further, they haven't acted on the EEO Commissioner's recommendations regarding pay for aged care workers, another core factor in the gender pay gap. And even when we look at non-budgetary measures, they've refused to pick up my member's bill, which just provides a technical tool to enable women to argue their case. 4 distinct things that this government could be doing to radically increase productivity in this country, and nothing. But if I'm being truly fair, I have to acknowledge that they have increased funding for the Ministry of Women's Affairs, and that ministry is responsible for monitoring the gender pay gap. And that is particularly important now that nobody's actually responsible for lowering that gap. So how will the ministry deliver for us women in New Zealand? Well, last year the Human Rights Commission critiqued the ministry, saying that women are being shortchanged by those setting targets on their behalf, and criticised their pale ambition for women's progress in New Zealand. Well, I'd expect, as I'm sure a Minister of Finance who cared about productivity would expect that ministry to have taken those criticisms on board and to have radically strengthened their targets. But no, actually they've watered them down From target of having 47% of appointments to state sector boards in 2015, now we find their target is to continue to increase from 41% in 2015. And a web page dedicated to gender pay gap just justifies the use of their measure. This year they've put out 6 media releases and have got contracted 1 piece of research. That's this government's pitiful commitment to gender pay inequality.
Stephen Browning. I rise to speak